By the time Adrian Vale reached the penthouse dining room, both of his daughters were gone. The balcony doors were still swinging in the wind, and a marriage certificate lay in the middle of the table like a knife. His oldest daughter had signed it 8 months ago, and the man she married in secret was a widowed mechanic with a 7-year-old daughter. If stories like this get under your skin, subscribe, like the video, and stay with me to the end. Because this one doesn't just break a family apart. It shows exactly what it costs to put power above love. "Sir," his head of security said, pale and breathless, "their phones are off. The garage camera caught them leaving at 2:13 a.m. Both of them. No driver." Adrian didn't answer. He just stared at the paper. Elena Vale, Noah Hart. The elegant signature of the daughter he had raised to inherit boardrooms. The plain, steady handwriting of a man Adrian had never even heard of. Below the signatures was one more name. Witness, Sophie Vale. His younger daughter hadn't just known. She had helped. The silence that followed felt louder than the alarm downstairs. Adrian picked up the certificate with 2 fingers, like it might burn him. "Find them." "We're already—" "No," he said, voice low enough to make the room freeze. "Not already. Find them." The housekeeper stood trembling by the kitchen island, clutching something in her hand. "Mr. Vale," she whispered, "there was also this." She handed him a folded note. 3 lines, written in Elena's neat script. "Please don't send Victor. Please don't make this uglier than it already is. For once, Dad, try to find us before your anger does." Adrian read it twice. Then he looked at the empty hallway that led to his daughter's bedrooms, and for the first time in years, something colder than rage touched him. Fear. Not because Elena had married someone beneath their world, not even because both girls had vanished in the middle of the night, because Elena's note didn't sound like a girl rebelling. It sounded like someone running. An hour later, the penthouse became a war room. Screens lit up with traffic feeds. Security teams took calls. Assistants whispered. Lawyers arrived before sunrise. Adrian stood in the middle of it all, in the same white shirt he'd slept in, jaw tight, eyes bloodshot. Every inch the man who built a billion-dollar empire from nothing. But every few minutes, his gaze drifted back to the marriage certificate. Noah Hart, 32. Owner of Hart Auto, East River. Widower. 1 child. The file Victor pulled together in 15 minutes looked insultingly small. No criminal record, no lawsuits, no social climbing history, no evidence of blackmail. Just a man with grease on his hands, a modest garage, and a daughter in 2nd grade. That almost made Adrian angrier. There was no scheme visible enough to hate. Only a life Elena had chosen. Victor Raines stepped into the room with his usual calm, immaculate in a navy suit, silver at the temples, voice smooth as polished glass. "I've informed legal," he said. "We can freeze Elena's trust before this man gets access to anything." Adrian didn't look at him. "I didn't ask for legal. You asked me to fix it." The sentence landed wrong. Fix it. That was what Victor had been doing for 20 years. Scandal, press, internal leaks, board rebellions. Ever since Adrian's wife died, Victor had become the hand that cleaned up the messes Adrian never had time to grieve. But now, standing in that bright room with both daughters gone, Adrian heard the ugliness in the phrase. Not help them. Not protect them. Fix it. He folded the note and slipped it into his pocket. "Get me the address." Noah Hart's garage sat beneath an old brick rail bridge on the east side, squeezed between a laundromat and a shuttered bakery. By 8 in the morning, Adrian's black sedan was parked outside, looking like it had taken a wrong turn into another life. The garage door was half open. Inside, the place had already been torn apart. A tool chest lay overturned, drawers yanked open, papers everywhere. A coffee mug shattered near the lift. One of the fluorescent lights flickered hard enough to make the whole room pulse. Noah Hart stood near the back office with blood dried at his temple and one sleeve ripped open. When he saw Adrian, he actually laughed. A short, tired, unbelieving laugh. "Of course," Noah said. "First your daughter disappears. Then you show up." Adrian stepped forward. "Where is Elena?" Noah's face changed instantly. The exhaustion stayed, but the humor disappeared. "If I knew that," he said, "do you really think I'd still be standing here?" Adrian's security moved closer, but Noah didn't flinch. He looked past all of them, directly at Adrian, like money meant nothing in that room. "Men came here at 4, Noah said. "Suits. One of them knew my daughter's name. One of them told me if I wanted Daisy safe, I'd stop asking questions." Adrian frowned. "Who sent them?" Noah held his stare. "That's what I was hoping you'd tell me." Before Adrian could answer, a small voice came from the office doorway. "Daddy?" Both men turned. A little girl with tangled curls and one sock stood clutching a stuffed rabbit missing an ear. Daisy. Her eyes moved from Noah's cut face to Adrian's expensive coat, then back again. "Are the bad men gone?" she asked. Noah's entire body softened in a way Adrian found almost painful to witness. He crouched immediately, ignoring his own bruises. "Yeah, Bug, they're gone." "You promised." "I know." "You said Elena wouldn't let anything happen to us." The room changed. Adrian saw it in Noah's face first, that raw flash of guilt only parents knew. Then in the little girl's voice, "Elena. Not Ms. Vale, not your daughter. Elena." As if she belonged in the center of this child's safety. Noah stood slowly. "You don't get to storm in here and act like she's been tricked. Elena loves my daughter. My daughter loves her. That's the first honest thing anyone in your world should know." Adrian's jaw tightened. "You expect me to believe my daughter married you for love?" "No," Noah said. "I expect you to believe she ran because she was afraid." "Of me?" Noah gave him a look so sharp it nearly passed for pity. "If she wasn't afraid of you," he said quietly, "she would have told you." That should have made Adrian explode. Instead, it lodged somewhere deeper, because he had no answer. He searched the office, the garage, the cameras out back. Nothing useful. Then, in a dented metal drawer, one of his men found a cheap burner phone wrapped in a shop towel. There was only one saved video on it. Adrian pressed play. Elena's face filled the screen. She looked exhausted. Hair tied back, no makeup, eyes red. "Dad," she said, and her voice cracked on the word. "If you're watching this, it means either I lost my nerve or I ran out of time." Adrian didn't breathe. "I know what this looks like. I know what you'll think. That I betrayed you. That I embarrassed you. That I threw everything away for some reckless fantasy." She swallowed. "But I didn't. I married Noah because he is the only man I have ever known who never made love feel like obedience." Noah looked away. Elena continued. "Sophie helped because she knows what Victor is capable of. If he finds the files before you do, it won't just destroy the company. It will destroy you. And if you still think I'm overreacting, ask yourself one question. Why was I more afraid of the man you trust than of disappointing you? The video ended. No location, no explanation of the files, just that. Victor. Adrian stared at the dark screen. One of his security men shifted uncomfortably. Noah folded his arms. "Well?" Noah asked. Adrian said nothing, but on the drive back to the tower, he replayed that sentence over and over. Why was I more afraid of the man you trust than of disappointing you? He wanted to reject it. He wanted to say Eleanor had been manipulated, that Noah had filled her head, that Sophie had always been dramatic, that this was all a childish, emotional mess. But some truths don't enter through logic. They enter through memory. Sophie, 18, pulling her hand out of Victor's at a gala, face tight. Eleanor, last Christmas, saying softly, "Can you please stop letting him speak to us like employees?" Adrian brushing both moments aside because there had been shareholders waiting, cameras rolling, a company to save. At 11, his assistant told him the press had the story. By noon, every business site in the country had a smiling photo of Adrian Vale beside the headline, "CEO's heiress secretly marries single dad as second daughter vanishes." By 1, the board demanded an emergency meeting. By 2, Adrian was standing under white-hot press lights while microphones rose toward his face like weapons. "Mr. Vale, did your daughter marry for money? Is this why the Mercer deal is collapsing? Has your younger daughter been kidnapped? Did your family oppose the marriage because of class?" For a second, his whole life reduced itself into one cruel image. Not the empire. Not the glass tower with his name on it. A 7-year-old girl somewhere watching strangers spit the word "single dad" like it meant contaminated. Victor stepped in front of the cameras and gave the press exactly what Adrian would once have admired. A flawless, bloodless statement. "This is a private family matter," he said. "Mr. Vale is focusing on the safe return of both daughters. Vale Global remains stable." Stable. Adrian looked at him then. Really looked. Victor never once said Eleanor's name. Never once said Sophie's. As if they were liabilities first, daughters second. The board meeting was worse. Men who had toasted his success for years now asked in measured tones whether he was emotionally positioned to lead during family disruption. One suggested temporary delegation. Another mentioned investor confidence. A third asked whether Eleanor's secret marriage exposed poor judgment in the Vale household. Adrian sat through every word. Then Victor slid a folder across the table. Inside was a draft statement disowning Eleanor from any corporate role until personal circumstances were evaluated. Adrian's eyes lifted slowly. Victor kept his voice low. "You need to cut cleanly, before she drags the stock down with whatever this is. And Sophie?" Victor barely paused. "She'll come back when she needs money." Something inside Adrian snapped with terrifying quiet. He closed the folder. "You will never say that about my daughter again." The room went dead still. Victor blinked once, as if he had misheard. Adrian rose from his chair. "Meeting adjourned." "Adrian," Victor said, warning now under the silk. "Emotion is exactly what predators around you are counting on." Adrian leaned in slightly. "Funny," he said. "That's starting to sound like experience." Then he walked out. At 6 that evening, Sophie called. Not Adrian. Noah. The call came through the burner phone. Adrian and Noah were in the same room now, unwilling allies stitched together by panic. Daisy slept curled on a sofa in Adrian's private residence upstairs because Noah refused to leave her anywhere unguarded, and Adrian, against every instinct he would have recognized a week earlier, had insisted she stay where he could protect her. Noah answered on speaker. "Sophie?" Her breathing came first, fast, uneven, then a whisper. "Don't say where you are." "Sophie," Noah said, standing so fast his chair scraped. "Where's Elena?" A pause. Then Sophie's voice broke. "She went back for me." Adrian felt the blood leave his face. "What happened?" he demanded. Sophie heard him and went silent. For 3 full seconds she said nothing. Then, quietly, "You came?" "I'm here," Adrian said. He hated how much pleading entered his voice. "Tell me where you are." Another shaky breath. "I found the files in Victor's archive 3 weeks ago," she said. "He buried internal reports from Vale Mobility, defective brake assemblies, fatal failures. He moved everything through shell vendors and pushed auto-sign approvals while you were with Mom in hospice." Noah closed his eyes. Adrian gripped the edge of the desk. Sophie kept talking, words tumbling now, too fast, like if she stopped, she might lose nerve. "One of the death claims was Noah's wife, Clara Hart. The brakes failed on the highway. Victor buried the engineering review, paid out through a silent settlement team, and told legal to stall anyone who pushed." Noah made a sound Adrian would never forget. Not anger, something more ruined, as if grief had been forced open again. "I told Elena," Sophie said. "She already knew Noah's case number. She'd been trying to tell you for months. Every time she tried, Victor got there first. Meetings, travel, damage control, whatever excuse worked. He kept us away from you, Dad. You just made it easy." The line crackled. "Where are you?" Adrian said again. "Old St. Anne's," Sophie whispered. "The chapel near the river. But don't come with security. Victor has one of your former guards with him. Elena came here with the drive. She said if Victor wanted the files, he'd have to look her in the eye first." The call cut off. For 1 second, neither man moved. Then Adrian grabbed his coat. Noah caught his arm. "If this is a trap—" "It is a trap," Adrian said. "The question is, for who?" They drove through rain so heavy the city became a blur of red lights and black glass. Halfway there, Noah finally said the thing that had been strangling the air between them for hours. She didn't hide the marriage because she was ashamed. Adrian stared ahead. She hid it because she knew you'd make her choose. Noah's voice was steady, but grief sat underneath every word. Between your approval and her life, between your world and mine, between being your daughter and being loved. Adrian swallowed hard. "You think I don't know that now?" Noah turned to him. "Do you?" Adrian's hands tightened on the wheel. "When my wife was dying," he said, eyes fixed on the road, "I spent the last month trying to keep the company from collapsing. I told myself I was doing it for my family, for the girls, for their future." His voice roughened. "The night Marianne died, Elena was 14. Sophie was 8. Elena held her sister in the hallway while I signed a financing package from a hospital chair. The next morning, Sophie asked if I was coming home with them, and I told her I had a board call. He laughed once, but there was nothing warm in it. I have been telling myself for 12 years that I sacrificed tenderness so they would never feel unsafe. And somehow, I raised 2 daughters who felt safer running into the night than staying in my house. Noah looked away, because there was nothing to argue with in that. St. Anne's had been condemned years ago. The chapel sat near the river, dark and leaning, its broken stained glass flashing when lightning tore across the sky. They went in through the side door. The nave smelled like wet stone and dust. "Elena?" Adrian called. A shape stepped from the shadows. Not Elena. Victor. Perfect coat, dry shoes, calm face. "Honestly," he said, "I expected you alone." Noah moved instantly, but 2 men emerged with guns low at their sides. Then Elena's voice cut through the darkness. "Dad!" She stood near the altar, wrists bound in front of her with plastic ties. Sophie sat on the floor beside a pillar, lips split, eyes blazing. Elena looked pale but upright. Victor smiled slightly. "Now we're all here." Adrian's chest went hollow. "Let them go." Victor ignored him and nodded toward Noah. "This is what she chose over everything you built," he said. "A widower with debt, a dead-end garage, and somebody else's child." Elena lifted her chin. "Don't talk about Daisy." Victor's expression hardened a fraction. "There. That. Exactly that."
You were born for influence, Elena. But you wanted mess. Children with scraped knees, bills, a husband who comes home smelling like engine oil. You wanted a life so small, it would have made your mother cry. "Don't you dare talk about my mother," Elena said, and for the first time, Adrian heard pure hatred in her voice. Victor turned to Adrian. "This is what weakness does. It breeds more of itself." Adrian took 1 step forward. "You killed people." Victor actually seemed offended by the phrasing. "I contained a defect before it destroyed the company. You buried deaths. I saved 23,000 jobs." Sophie laughed through blood. "There he is." Victor glanced at her with contempt. This one always had terrible timing. Then he looked back at Adrian. "You signed the approvals, Adrian. Your name is on everything. So here's what happens. Elena gives me the drive. You step down quietly. I absorb the blast. Publicly, this becomes a family breakdown, an unstable daughter, an emotional CEO, an unfortunate misunderstanding." He smiled. "Or we do this the ugly way." Adrian stared at him. For years, he had admired Victor's efficiency because he never made messes visible. Now he saw what that talent really was. A man who could bury bodies under clean language. Elena spoke without looking away from Victor. "Dad, don't do it." Victor turned sharply. "You really think he'll choose you over survival?" That question landed in the center of the ruined chapel and waited. Adrian looked at his daughters. At Sophie, bruised but defiant. At Elena, terrified yet still standing between Noah and danger. And suddenly, he saw something unbearable. They were both watching him not like daughters watching a father, like witnesses watching a verdict. He reached into his coat slowly. Victor's men raised their weapons. Noah tensed. Adrian took out his phone. Then he opened the live investor stream app Vail Global used for quarterly statements and pressed one button. The red light came on.
Good evening, Adrian said into the camera, voice echoing through the chapel. This is Adrian Vale. If you are watching this, it means I am making the only honest statement of my career. Victor lunged, but Noah slammed into one of the guards before he got far enough. The second guard grabbed Noah from behind. Sophie kicked the first one in the knee. Elena threw herself sideways into Victor as Adrian kept speaking. For years, my company profited while I let fear, loyalty, and convenience blind me to the people inside it.
Tonight I am turning over evidence of concealed brake defects, fraudulent approvals, and fatal settlements linked to Victor Reigns and every executive who helped him. Victor struck Elena hard enough to throw her to the floor. Noah roared. The chapel exploded into movement. A gun skidded across stone. Sophie crawled for it. One guard dragged her back by the jacket. Adrian crossed the room and hit Victor with all the fury he'd spent 12 years mistaking for discipline. They went down together. The phone kept streaming. Victor clawed at Adrian's throat and hissed, "You think confession makes you noble?" Adrian slammed him into the broken pew. "No," he said. "It makes me late." Nearby, Noah took a blow to the ribs and still kept coming. Elena got to Sophie first, using her bound hands to yank the guard backward. The gun fired into the ceiling. Glass rained down. Then, sirens howled outside. Real ones, not security. Police. Sophie, breathless, looked at Adrian through the chaos and shouted, "I said an auto-release if the call ended!" Victor's eyes widened for the first time. Panic. Cold, beautiful, carefully managed panic. He bolted toward the side door. Adrian could have chased him. Instead, he turned because Sophie had screamed. A beam of old wood, cracked loose by the gunfire and years of rot, dropped from above. Sophie froze. Elena reached for her but was too far. Adrian didn't think. He moved. The beam hit his shoulder like a car crash and drove him to one knee. Pain burst white through his body. But Sophie was underneath him, alive, sobbing now, both hands clinging to his shirt like she was 8 years old again. "Dad?" "I've got you," he said, though he could barely breathe. "I've got you." Outside, doors slammed. Officers rushed in. Victor was dragged down in the mud by the riverbank before he made the bridge. By sunrise, the whole story belonged to the world. The live stream was everywhere. Adrian's confession, Victor's threats, the link to the buried crash reports. Vale Global stock crashed before markets even properly opened. Analysts called it catastrophic. Commentators called it career suicide. Lawyers called it unprecedented cooperation. Adrian, sitting in a hospital chair with his shoulder in a sling, called it overdue. Elena stood by the window while Noah argued softly with a nurse about Daisy being allowed upstairs before visiting hours. Sophie sat cross-legged on the couch eating stale crackers from a vending machine, like the entire collapse of a corporate empire had merely inconvenienced her. No one spoke for a while. Then Adrian looked at Elena. "How long?" She turned. "What?" "How long have you been married?" She hesitated. 8 months. He nodded once. "And Daisy?" Eleanor's face changed immediately, softer around the edges. "She's 7. She likes strawberry milk even though it makes her hyper. She still thinks pennies are lucky. She sleeps with one shoe off because she says it helps her run faster in dreams." Adrian almost smiled. Almost. "You love her?" Eleanor answered without hesitation. "Yes." He looked at Noah then. The man had bruises blooming down one side of his face and dried blood on his collar, and still, somehow, all he cared about was whether his daughter had eaten breakfast. Adrian had spent years measuring men by net worth, leverage, polish, pedigree. Now he asked the only question that mattered. "When Daisy wakes up crying in the middle of the night," he said, "who gets up first?" Noah frowned, caught off guard. "I do." "And when you're angry?" Noah didn't perform, didn't posture, just answered. "I cool off before I speak, if I can. If I can't, I apologize after." Adrian looked down at his bandaged hand. Then he said the words Eleanor least expected. "I should have met you before I judged you." The room went still. Noah stared at him. Eleanor's eyes filled instantly, but she blinked hard, refusing to let the tears fall yet. Adrian turned to Sophie. "And I should have listened to you before you had to bleed to be believed." That did it. Sophie's mouth twisted, and suddenly she was crying the ugly, furious way people cry when they've wanted something too long to trust it once it appears. "You really sucked at this whole father thing," she said through tears. A broken laugh escaped him. "I know." "You were terrifying." "I know." "You missed my piano recital in 9th grade and told the assistant to bring flowers instead." Adrian closed his eyes briefly. "I know." She wiped her face with the heel of her hand. "Okay, just making sure the confession stays accurate." Eleanor laughed then, one wet, disbelieving sound, and that was when the tears finally fell. 3 months later, Adrian stood outside a small brick house in Queens, holding a grocery bag and feeling more nervous than he had before any merger in his life. He had resigned from Vale Global. Federal investigations were still moving. Civil suits multiplied weekly. He had sold 2 properties, liquidated private holdings, and set up a victims fund that began with most of what he once would have called his legacy. The headlines no longer called him visionary. Some called him ruined. Some called him brave. Neither interested him much.
Because right then, the front door opened, and Daisy Hart flew into the yard wearing rain boots in the wrong season. "You're late," she announced. Adrian looked at his watch. "By 40 seconds. That's late." Behind her, Noah leaned against the doorway, amused despite himself. Elena stood in the kitchen with flour on her cheek. Sophie was at the table helping with homework she clearly didn't understand, but loudly pretended to master. It was noisy, tight, imperfect. Nothing matched, and it felt more like home than the penthouse ever had. Daisy squinted at the grocery bag. "Did you get the good strawberries?" "I had them checked by 2 separate vendors," Adrian said. Noah groaned. Elena laughed. Sophie yelled from inside, "He means yes, Daisy." The little girl grabbed his hand and dragged him toward the porch. Halfway there, Adrian stopped. "Elena?" She turned. For a second, neither of them said anything. There were still scars between them. Some wounds healed quiet. Others stayed tender long after the bleeding ended. But Adrian took a breath and stepped through the last pride he had left. "I can't change the fact that you had to marry without your father there," he said. "But if you ever want to do it again, in front of the people who love you, even just for the photos and the cake and the ridiculous speeches—" Elena's hand flew to her mouth. Noah looked at her, stunned. Adrian's voice roughened. "I'd be honored to walk you down whatever aisle you choose. Garage, backyard, courthouse. I don't care. I just don't want to miss it twice." Elena crossed the yard before he finished. She threw her arms around him so suddenly he almost dropped the groceries, and when he held her back,
he realized something that made his throat burn. His daughter no longer felt like someone standing on the far side of a boardroom table. She felt like his child again. That night, they ate outside under cheap string lights Noah had hung crookedly. Sophie mocked everyone equally. Daisy spilled juice on Adrian's sleeve and gasped like the world had ended, only to relax when he told her some stains were worth keeping. Elena leaned against Noah's shoulder with the soft exhaustion of someone who finally didn't have to hide. And when dinner was over, Daisy climbed into Adrian's lap with her missing ear rabbit and whispered, "Mom used to say families are the people who stay when things get ugly." Adrian looked around the table. At the mechanic he had judged. At the daughter who had risked everything for love. At the younger daughter who had dragged the truth into daylight with bruised hands.
At the little girl who had lost one parent and still somehow trusted the world enough to make room for one more. Then he kissed the top of Daisy's head and said, "Your mom was right." Because in the end, the company survived without him. The towers still glittered. The markets reopened. Another man took his office, his chair, his parking space, his title. But none of that followed him home. What followed him home was laughter through an open kitchen window. A child asking if he knew how to braid hair. A daughter no longer flinching when his phone rang. Another daughter teasing him for bringing too much dessert. And the quiet, humbling miracle of being forgiven by the very people he had once been sure he was protecting. For the first time in his life, Adrian Vale was no longer the most powerful man in the room. He was something far rarer. He was a father his family finally wanted to keep.